Donika Hristova is a certified integrative nutrition and keto for mental health coach based in Northern Virginia. After years of navigating bipolar depression, binge eating, and the internal conflict of conventional treatments, she experienced root cause healing through the ketogenic lifestyle as a therapeutic intervention for mental health. Donika received training from Harvard psychiatrist and nutrition expert Dr. Georgia Ede, and her work is deeply informed by the pioneering research of Dr. Chris Palmer. Today, she helps others balance mental health, empower themselves, and reclaim their lives by addressing the root causes through food and mindset coaching, transforming struggle into sustainable well-being. One more thing. Do you want to boost your energy, mental clarity, and focus in just 30 days? Click the link below so that you can download my free guide with 6 simple changes that are going to help you feel amazing and confident. And if you're ready to dive deeper and uncover the root causes of your symptoms, book your free 45-minute exploration call today at nutritionwithconfidence.com. All right, enjoy the interview.
All right, Donika, I wanted to start off by asking you if you could share a bit about your personal experience overcoming bipolar disorder and binge eating.
Sure. Yes. And it's a great opening question. There is so much to cover there, but I'll try to summarize it as much as I can. So my experience with mental illness, bipolar, and the binge eating disorder, they are so like they go together kind of a thing. And so I consider them as a package. It's very often when with mental illness, there is some kind of impulsive type of additional behavior, whether that's eating disorder or something else. So my experience has been that I was diagnosed a little bit later on in my life, which I think it's kind of close to what the typical diagnosis happened. For me, that was around 27, 28. I was devastated by this diagnosis when I got it. It was so scary. It was very, it kind of meant I made it mean something about me and about my future. And I almost saw myself as this disabled person that is not any longer going to be able to achieve my dreams, or it put some sort of hard limitation on my capabilities and just, the value I can bring to the world. So it was very, very, devastating experience. And I did seek second opinion and like had that initial fight with it because, that denial phase where you just don't want to accept it. You don't want to believe that it's true for you. You just somehow deny it and hope there is something else that may be more bearable. But it wasn't. It just was not. I couldn't make that happen. I couldn't erase the diagnosis out of my records or, out of my life really. And so after a lot of like inner like dis-ease, so to speak, with that new identity, right? Like, because up until that point, I always perceived myself as someone who can achieve a lot. Like I was very driven, very ambitious. I wanted to do things and really grow and evolve. And, my mind was going into dreams that were very big. And I was very confident that I may get there with hard work. I was very committed as well. And this just like turned my whole life upside down, that I had to it created a new identity that I now had to revolve around and see how I can scale back, because what I thought was possible for me didn't seem like it. So that's just to give you a grasp, like a glimpse of how I perceived it, right? Like that's not necessarily what was happening probably, but the weight it was putting on my self reflection and perception was extremely heavy. And that only fueled my eating disorder, which is always coming up when I am having that internal disbalance and when I'm stressed.
I
And
see.
so with the binge eating, it's just seeking comfort in food, which is the most easy to find, accessible, quick solution. Eventually, obviously, it does not bring a relief. It's a very temporary tool to take the edge off, and it does work for a moment, but
Right.
then it only fuels the next cycle because now after the relief is temporary, received for a very brief moment, then everything else that I dealt with before the binge keeps coming up. Well, now plus the guilt and shame around my behavior, which I knew I shouldn't have done. So that
Mm,
only sets me up for the next binge episode.
mm,
And it
mm.
was just, you can get an idea of how like desperate that like hamster wheel
Oh, yeah.
of just low self-worth and desperation and like just desperate attempts to find a way out, not really a way out, but just like to handle it, really.
Yeah.
Like it almost, yeah. So it was the toughest time of my life,
Yeah.
definitely. I didn't, for a while, didn't see a way out of it. But also part of me was still maybe that same part that was hoping that everything that my heart desired, that I wanted to bring to the world was still alive in some way.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so a brief history with the disorder was that I was put on medications and I had very, very big, I did not agree with that.
Oh,
It was just not something that I internally believed in because it felt like it didn't feel like that root cause treatment, right? It felt
right.
like something that we're putting like a band-aid on
Mm,
the wound, but we're not resolving it.
mhm.
Because at that time when I got the diagnosis, I was dealing with some very, very big challenges in my perception in terms of my life and my values. And so I had a real life presented me with a really challenging situation that triggered the depression and like all the symptoms associated with it. And so I
Okay.
felt like, okay, now I'm going to take a medication to deal with the exact same situation, just I'm going to feel better about the exact same issue. You
Mm.
see where
Hmm.
it was not aligned because I'm like, and I'm not changing anything that is causing the symptoms, the despair and like all of that.
Hmm.
And on top of that, I'm taking a medication and I'm just coming from Bulgaria, which
Oh, yeah.
is a very small country. And, you know, I grew up in a family that's relatively healthy, very, quite healthy, actually, oriented. And I just knew the power of lifestyle and food and exercise. I knew it firsthand.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and I always heard back then that, you know, bigger countries deal with, you know, like the medicine is so much better and more evolved and more comprehensive. But I also knew that people kind of abuse it a little bit and take advantage of it a little too much rather than doing the holistic work, which
Hmm.
oftentimes is harder because you have to go for the exercise, be consistent, regulate your sleep when sometimes you just want to stay late and, you
Yeah.
know, do watch what you eat and avoid things that may feel great but are not loving you back,
Hmm.
that kind of approach.
Hmm.
And so I was put on medication for 6 years, and it was, even though I had that internal battle that did not sit right with me, I was like, you know what, if authorities like doctors, and I got two opinions and they agreed on the same thing, I was
Hmm.
like, I just have to do it.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
was on it for 6 years and I was stable and I was functioning quite well. But you know, that thought of that that's just not it. Like I feel like that cannot be it. I feel
Right.
like the next stressful time of my life is only going to bring me back to the doctor's office where they're going to suggest to increase the dose. And obviously any medication that powerful is going to have some side effects, certainly, even though they were
Right.
clean, somewhat clean, and let's say less damaging or less severe in terms of side effect. There were some side effects for sure.
Yeah.
And so that just didn't sit with me. And that took me on the path to seek alternative solutions.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
could you share a bit more about some of the experiences you were having before you went on the medication with, I know with bipolar, there can be really intense depression and then a level of mania. Would you maybe, if you feel comfortable, share a story or just talk a bit about some of those experiences that you were having?
Yeah, sure. So the with bipolar there are two types, and one is bipolar type 1 and bipolar type 2. My diagnosis was bipolar type 2, which is usually associated with it's more common among women, and it's more severe in the depression portion of the disorder. And the mania is actually called hypomania because it's not as severe oftentimes. So it may look almost like high performance type of a behavior where you sleep less, you are more energetic, you can be more creative, more hopeful. You may take risks more than you normally do. So there is a little bit of that manic component, but it's not completely out of touch, so to speak, which may happen with like mania. So for
Mhm.
me, hypomania wasn't ever something I suffered with, honestly. Even though I recognize I've had those episodes, they were honestly always very productive and did not cause any disturbances that I was aware of,
Mm.
at least when I look back, because I never suspected that this was going on. Only in hindsight, I kind of was able to think about it and assess how it impacted me. So that was not honestly an issue. Even with the sleep, I would like my shortest sleep would be 6 hours, which most people
Okay.
live on that schedule anyway, as you can imagine. It wasn't that bad. The only thing is that if the brain goes in that direction, usually that is followed by the depressive episode, which for me was severely more intense. Like that was where I really, really suffered. Like it was
Mhm.
very hard and very expressed. So it was anxiety, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of feeling of imposter, where because I was also functioning quite well, I am by myself. I'm an immigrant in the country, and so it's just me here, and obviously I have to take care of myself. And
Yeah.
I arrived in the country with $300. So I
Wow.
got diagnosed on the third year when I was here, but those 3 years were my hardest working years as someone who
Wow.
had to make up. Like, I didn't know anyone. I just had to figure everything out on my
Wow.
own and, find a place to live, find a school where I, went, find jobs and
Yeah.
coordinate everything, buy a car. I didn't have a, right? Like start from scratch.
That's
And
amazing.
so I really had to work a lot, and that came at the cost of compromising the quality of food I ate, the amount of sleep I was getting, dealing with a lot of stress, like just intensity in terms of living one job, going to the other, going to school, having to balance it all.
Mhm.
The first 2 years, I think I had only like a half day off when I had to do laundry and like cleaning and those kind of, so
Yeah.
rarely, barely any time really to just, but I didn't even back then, it was like a survival. That's all I knew, and I knew I have to do it. And I was even grateful that I have this
Mhm.
opportunity.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I guess with time, it's just like build up, like the
Yeah.
pressure, the tension, everything working together. And so depression started creeping in for me. It really started with the eating disorder going full blown. Like it
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
disastrous in terms of how much I was binging. And binging is, as for those that may not be quite familiar with it, just to define it, is that completely out of control episode where I would eat to the point where I'm physically sick,
Yeah.
incapable to fit any piece of food, and yet my brain all it thinks about is, "Ooh, I need more."
Yeah.
And so just to distinguish, that's not emotional eating, that's like binge eating. It's
Mhm.
completely out of control. It feels like you cannot control it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like that went to the point where it was like really, really bad. And at that time, I was seeing a therapist who was helping with the eating disorder portion.
Mhm.
And yeah, and little by little, I just started feeling, worse and worse, a lot of anxiety. All I remember is that I was feeling so anxious at every moment. I didn't need a trigger. I didn't need something to happen in my outside environment to feel like my life is threatened. To
Mhm.
that degree is how much I felt like I'm incapable. Obviously, because of the amount of energy that I was using to worry and to just like hold my nervous system together,
Yeah.
I was not thinking clearly. So I may catch myself doing stupid mistakes, and that terrified me. It only
Mm.
confirmed how something is wrong with me, which was my narrative.
Mm.
And so I was living in this constant state of something is wrong with me. I'm constantly seeing proof of that, and people will find out about how dysfunctional I am or like how defective I am. That's really how I felt, and how incapable of bringing value I am, so that I will not be able to ever find a job. And I know that's very, but in my mind, that's the
Yeah.
dialogue that was happening. If you ask me now, I
Right.
clearly understand that this is totally not the case. But back then, I lived in that, story. And so the amount, and I'm like, if I don't have a job, then I won't be able to pay my rent, and what's going to happen to me. And so,
Mm. Mhm.
yeah, all I remember is that anxiety, and it was progressing, and like the worst case scenario was constantly front of the row in my head, up
Mm.
until to one point I got that panic attack where it just escalated to a point where my mind just lost it, like it couldn't bear anymore, right? Like that
Right.
that
Right.
sense of it. And so that's kind of it led to so much desperation and like disbelief in myself, and not seeing an outcome that could serve me. Like
Mhm.
anything I could see was not anything that I wanted. Like I just
Yeah.
couldn't see myself winning.
Mhm.
And so little by little, that led to complete, resignation in terms of my willingness to participate in life. I still showed up, but just because I felt like I don't even have a choice not to. So thankfully, my type of depression was such that I was able to function, even though sometimes I would like literally tears would come from
No.
my eyes when
Yeah.
when I do something on my own and like I'm out of sight of people.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm getting
What?
even emotional now when I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah,
that.
that's so hard. You went through so
Uh,
much.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So those are some of the examples of where I lived and what life was like back
I'm
then.
I'm so curious. So you got on medication. How long were you on medication for before you started to find the deep-seated, kind of you had mentioned you're in inner conflict with that medication. So then you
Mhm.
found some alternative therapies that helped you. How long did that process go?
Yes, it was 6 years. And the funny thing is, so that's something worth mentioning, I think, that may some people may resonate with it. So when my psychiatrist gave me the diagnosis, I was obviously in tears and I was devastated. And she said, we're going to start at the minimum dose of a medication that's mood stabilizer. So essentially, the medication I was put on for depression was actually a neurological medication. It was used for epilepsy treatment, which was another thing that really didn't add
Add
up
up.
in my
Yeah.
mind. I was like, why am I taking epilepsy medication for my depression? It just
Mm-hmm.
really didn't resonate much. Like I wasn't trusting it much. So I started at the 25 milligrams dose, and just that, I felt a little bit of relief. I felt that maybe I can do this. Maybe there is a way. And I don't know what it is. It wasn't good enough to
Awesome.
completely see the full picture, but I
Mm-hmm.
got a little bit of hope and power that maybe I can push through and go
Mm-hmm.
back to where I know I can handle life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I gave that feedback to my psychiatrist, she was like, and I told her, maybe I can stop here. Give me a chance.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Because initially I wanted her to give me a chance with lifestyle. And what I was told is that such serious mental illness cannot be treated with lifestyle, and I better understand that I'm going to be on meds for the rest of my life.
Mm,
And I agreed with that because I had to. And so when I suggested that maybe I can stick to a very low dose and maybe that will do it for me,
mhm.
she responded that actually because I need it so much, that's why it feels so responsive. Like my body is, it's almost like it's craving exactly this medication. And now that I'm getting even a
Mm.
little bit, it's just a sign that I need more of it. Oh my
Oh
gosh.
no.
So we went up to the 75 milligrams, and I'm like, I really feel a lot better. I want to stop here. I don't want to keep adding up. And she was like, you don't understand. You're feeling better, but that's not sustainable. The medical dose is 100, and anything below that may feel temporary better, but in the long run is not sustainable to keep you well,
Okay.
like to stay well.
Mhm.
And so that was denied. I did fight back a little bit. So we stayed on the 75 a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but then initially couldn't win that battle. And we went to the minimal medical threshold, which she said, and I've heard different opinions on that, but back then she said it was 100 milligrams. And I stayed on it for 6 years, very, very
Years.
religiously, like taking it
Yeah.
daily. And yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So what pivotal moments led you to explore alternative therapies then?
Well, so when I was, medication really helped, and I want to acknowledge that. I'm
Yeah.
actually really grateful that I could probably say it saved my life. It really helped me at a time where probably I don't know. Looking back, probably nothing else could, given
Mhm.
my circumstances.
Yes.
So I'm very grateful, and I want to acknowledge that portion. And yet, I just don't think it's something that is designed to work long term. I think it really works for those urgent matter situation, and it can help bring some relief just until the person gets some space to start doing a little bit more effort on their own with alternatives that
Mm.
usually take more time, and they're healing the root, so it's just longer term solutions, and the medication can provide quicker uh, relief, and in that way I feel like it has its place, and I want to acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
um, but throughout all 6 years, even though I was telling myself, I just need to forget that this is happening and start living my life the way it is, kind of because it was bothering me so much. I felt like I'm so defective, again, that same narrative, that now I need a medication to keep me going because without it, I'm done. Like I cannot do life. And that was such a powerless place
Mhm.
to be at. It never left, like it was always going on the back of my mind. And so, um, also life kept happening. Like I had to switch jobs and like progress in my career and overcome challenges. And at one point when I felt more stable, more accomplished, had a little bit more stability, I wasn't that same immigrant that had to work with a half day off barely for the whole week, and I just was at a much better place life wise.
Mhm.
I thought maybe it's a good opportunity to explore alternatives, especially knowing that at the lower dose. And back then, all I knew was that once you start a medication, you never stop. You do
Mm.
not do that, because if you do it, what I knew, what I read, and like what was the literature saying about it is that you're gonna even feel worse than you were when you first started. And where I was when I first started was not,
Mhm.
it was the worst place I knew. And so thinking even just about that was a no-go, but like
Mm.
even worse than that really kept me
Yeah.
hesitant, and like I was
Yeah.
very doubtful, but I still had, a lot of things going on. And I started reaching out to functional medicine doctors. I did have some free consultation with a few of them. And the moment when they would hear that my intention is to taper off or reduce medication, they would not. They would be like, we cannot help with
Mm.
that.
Mm.
And little by little, I continued searching the web, like maybe checking YouTube for some stories to hear how other people are all I wanted is someone to help me believe that it's possible. That's really
Yeah.
what I wanted.
Yeah.
And for a while, I couldn't find it. But at one point, I found this video on YouTube that's it was Carrie Brown, and it was called "My Brain Was Trying to Kill Me," and it was her story about being suicidal and dealing and treating that with keto and how different her state of mind was and how life changed based on
Wow.
that treatment. And for me, that was like, this is what I needed. I wanted to hear that it's
Yeah.
possible, even though it wasn't nowhere nearly as backed up as it is now in science and um, talked about, right? Like it was not popular idea at all. But I wanted it. I really, that was like my dream. I was like,
Mm.
if this could happen, I'm gonna be, all in, and I would love for myself to be off medications because they were causing my brain to work differently, and I didn't feel comfortable. And like I was stable, but I really knew I it's not where I feel best. It really was
Yeah.
limited version of that.
Okay.
And so that's how I heard about this, started doing more research.
Hmm.
And the most powerful thing, because I want to be also very, yes, I'm open to innovative ideas, but I cannot afford to miss a day of work. And, I want to be very careful with those interventions. And I know where I was, and I could not afford to get back there. And so I wanted to back it up a little bit with science just to know it's a safe thing to do. And so I started digging deeper into the ketogenic diet used for epilepsy. And when I heard how much more impactful it was for treatment resistant patients, and knowing that my medication that was working for me was epilepsy treatment,
Hmm.
that's when I was like, okay, in my head, that made more sense.
Hmm.
This medication is for epilepsy. This works better than medication for epilepsy. I'm gonna try, even though I have no epilepsy.
Yeah.
And so that's where my journey started. That's how I got into it. Little by little, obviously, that kind of started progressing, but that was the initial spark of how I heard about it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I'm hearing there were a couple parts of you. One part was really hesitant to try more natural root cause approach like the ketogenic diet, especially given that there wasn't literature specifically for bipolar depression at that point in time. And we're still early on in the research, but I love that you were tuned into your body and realizing that the medications were not they were although they were very helpful and effective, and I completely agree with you that medication, psychiatric medications definitely are important for many people at periods of time. But I love that there was this other party that I was just so curious. That had this sense that I'm not treating the root cause here with the medication. And so I'm curious to hear, you started learning about this, and then how'd you decide to take the plunge into the ketogenic diet, and then what was that initial experience like when you started implementing the ketogenic protocol?
Mhm. Yes. So it was a lot of resistance initially because the major thing also with eating disorder was my weight. And that was such a big trigger. And just the idea of high fat, all I knew was that fat will make you fat. So everything I knew about healthy eating was low fat.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, how do I win this? Like there is a hope here, but not in high, what is this going to cost to my body? And for someone with eating disorder, to someone normal, that may sound very like, if you are dealing with mental illness, why would you care that much about your weight? But for someone with eating disorder, there is a different relationship there. So that's a big issue because I was really motivated to get better, but then it was like this thing that now is on the way. In addition to how safe is that really? Like, yes, I do have a little bit of knowledge, but yeah, you're right. You get that very well that it was for epilepsy and I did not have epilepsy. So I still didn't know what to expect. And again, all I knew was that there is no way that this is craziness. And especially because I have a family member with mental illness. My brother has bipolar type 1. So I was very well familiar with what the disorder looks like in someone else when I
Mhm.
didn't present with any of the symptoms. And I know that there is this piece of denial where the person doesn't want to admit they have an issue, and I didn't want to be that person. So a part of me really wanted to comply. If the doctors are saying that's what I need to do and stay on meds for the rest of my life, I don't want to be that person who says, no, I don't want to be on meds, because I've heard it from a loved one. And I was like, why don't you just stay on, take your meds and,
Mm.
be well with that? Because that's what we all thought was
Yeah.
the case. But then,
Right.
and so I guess I got a little sidetracked, but can you remind me the question?
Yeah. How did you start to implement that
Yeah.
ketogenic diet, and especially on your own? Did you have guidance?
Yeah. So I was always drawn into holistic health. And so I completed the Institute for Integrative Nutrition coaching program.
Mm.
Um, I think a year before that, just as a hobby. Back then, that was nowhere near something that I would get to do professionally. It was just something that I wanted to learn more about and implement in my own life. And so that initial resistance towards fat was one of the biggest challenges. But with more research and really carefully evaluating the validity of it and the latest research, that kind of helped me make peace with maybe, maybe it's not unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then the next biggest challenge was that as someone who was low fat, I was a very high carb eating my habits were
Addiction.
eating, yep. And so it was very challenging. For me at first, it was not an option to go into keto. It was just way too low carbs. I could not make that big of a leap. So I
Mm-mm.
never initially uh, counted. I didn't know how much carbs I was eating, but it was probably around 300. And on binging days, that could be even more. So you can imagine the target goal of 20 was just not doable
No,
yet.
no.
But where I started was the Whole30 diet. That really
Oh, yeah.
resonated with me. I'm like, you know what? I'm coming from that culture of non-processed foods. I know I feel better when I eat whole foods. So why don't I just eliminate sugar? At least
Awesome.
I can still eat carbohydrates, but no processed ones.
Yes.
And when I did that just for those 30 days, I felt better. I really did. And I
Awesome.
was like, there is something here and I don't want to miss it. And the time to introduce the foods that you eliminated throughout the diet came, and I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to lose that feeling a little bit better. It was still not it, but it was better. And I was talking to a friend. I remember we were out dining, and I was telling her, I don't want to reintroduce it. It's time for me to reintroduce, carbs and like dairy, but I'm so scared that I almost don't want to do it. And she was telling me, don't be stupid, like you can eat variety of foods, and that's what healthy is, and you should not be so restrictive. And I was thinking to myself, I just don't want to lose that feeling of being a little bit more stable, a little bit more cognitively capable, just sharper. I valued it a lot. And so I did slowly, eventually reintroduce foods, but I started implementing fasting.
Mm.
So I still continued on the path of lowering carbs, but I went heavily on the fasting
Okay.
gradually. I started with the intermittent fasting. I did 24-hour fasting. And after doing that for a while, I added a little bit more longer fasts.
Mm-hmm.
And those really helped. They made a huge difference. That was enough for me to see clearly the difference how I am when I eat carbs or when I fast. It
Wow.
was undeniable. It was just,
Mm.
I call it my 10x. My brain is just at a different capacity. A
Yeah.
capacity I dare to say, and I was always good at school and like didn't have issues with performing brain activity, so to say. Like I was learning well, I was performing well, I went to university and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I never knew my brain so capable as it was when fasted.
Yeah.
And my mood was better and my whole view of world was completely different.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just want to keep deepening that. I want to play with it because it sounds like there is a potential here untapped that I never even knew about. And so, how can I do that on a bigger scale and more sustainably? And so, I kept progressing. I
Mm-hmm.
kept restricting carbs, and obviously, fasting really helped because even just mentally to process that idea of eating, and eat. I didn't know what kind of foods are appropriate if
Mm-hmm.
no carbs, right?
Right.
And so it took probably 3 months, good 3 months before I was able to hit the 50 grams of net carbs between 30 and 50. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I lingered. For me, even that with exercise led to ketosis. And
Awesome.
so,
That's amazing.
yeah, that's
I'm
how I
so
started.
I'm so curious during your first implementation of the fasting and intermittent fasting and longer fasts, did you have any negative or positive side effects relating specifically to the binge eating? Like, I know a lot of people who would say that the fasting or restriction can be really triggers for people with binge eating disorder. But what was your experience with that?
Yes. I do have a story also in specifically that addresses this issue.
Oh,
So
good. Please
I
tell.
did feel so much better cognitively and more energetic that it was done now from a different place. This was not a fasting to lose weight. It
Yeah.
was a fasting to gain my control over my brain almost. You
Mm.
see how different that is. And
Mhm.
while, yes, the restriction of food was there, that piece was there, somehow the what I was getting was bigger than I just approached it differently, let's say that.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that before I even came to that point, I was seeing my prescriber, which was just a GP. It was not a psychiatrist, and she was just refilling my medication. And every six months or so, every time when I go to see her, I will tell her that my brain is not working well and I feel like it's damaged and I need someone to check it because I feel my brain is not okay. It's not doing its job. And
Mm.
every time she would tell me that sugar is a problem and I can try to limit it.
Mm. Mhm.
So I know I couldn't do it while she was giving me that advice. That was every time. At one point, she gave me references to someone like a, I guess, brain imaging person or something, but it was so expensive that
Ah.
and she told me they cannot do anything. Like, your brain is okay. Like she was telling me it's fine, that like how you feel is normal and all that
Mm.
didn't help.
Mm.
But when I started feeling that way and I went to see her, I, funny enough, have lost weight because I always also
Ah.
kept exercising. And for me, running, just a little bit of running helps a lot. So I did lose weight. And when I told her what I do, she was like, oh no, that's not okay because you have an eating disorder. So
Oh.
you're absolutely blowing up. Like this is an actual complete no-go in terms of the
No.
eating disorder. And I'm telling her, but listen, like I feel better than I haven't since I started this medication. It was so conflicting. I remember that. So she did
Mhm.
EKJ on me to check my levels and my heart and everything.
Mhm.
And it was
Perfect.
okay. And
Good.
she ordered another one because she could not believe it because my weight was, I think, 15 pounds less. So she was sure that that I'm starving or like I'm doing the fasting to lose the weight and I'm losing it.
Right.
But like, and that was not the case.
No.
So it's
Yeah.
it's a very like fine art to find the boundaries between those two, right? Like
Right.
fasting is probably not the best tool for someone with experienced eating disorder, but back then it did help. And I have to say that I avoid doing fasting nowadays, for example,
Mm.
because it can, I feel like the come from that you do it
Mm.
that place that you approach it from is very important. But
Absolutely.
back then it did more good than not. And so I left that doctor's office very conflicted because again, I was going against my doctor, and that's the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to listen to authorities and be responsible patient,
Yeah.
do what I'm told to do. I didn't want to be
Right.
that difficult patient that has their own opinions and pretends to know more.
Right.
That was not my intention,
Right.
but it's just how I felt, right? And I wanted the support, and it wasn't
Yeah.
there. So I felt like a few weeks after that, I was like, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Is she right? Maybe she is. But
Mm.
then I just, find the strength to keep going and diving deeper, and eventually, you know,
Yes. I'm so glad you did because, it is hard because when your providers are unintentionally putting fear into your mind, uh, out of care, of course, they love or that's their job is they want to help you.
yeah,
But the intention and just getting to know you and where you were coming from is so important, like you said, with any of these things that we do. But it is almost as if your brain just started working better, and these eating disorders are a brain misfiring even. And so by you doing the fasting for your brain, that was actually balancing the binge eating for you. And potentially, like in my own experience with disordered eating, with more, well, I was never fully diagnosed or anything, but I can relate to restrictions. And I got really, really thin at one point doing a lot of restriction. So maybe anorexic at some point, but never diagnosed. But I felt a shift in my brain at that time. But once and I never thought coming back from that fasting would be a tool for me. But after healing my metabolism, I can fast now, and it's a totally different approach to why I fast. I do it because of the brain function, for like you said, and I don't do it all the time. There's just a level of self-awareness that's really grounded when I am embarking on it versus like a desperate or just an anxious part of me that's trying to control something. That's where was coming from before. And that it is a multifactorial. There's a psychological pieces to it. There's so much dynamic with that eating. Anyone with just eating disorders using these tools, definitely do it with guidance and support. Because back when I was trying to heal myself and was restricting my diet a lot and was going down that rabbit trail of anorexia and binge eating, I was doing it alone. I was very alone, and that's I didn't have the information I needed to help me. But yeah, it's hard to ask your doctors for that because they don't have the knowledge base of nutrition. But getting a nutritionist can be so helpful, I think, if you're exploring dietary changes, because otherwise the doctors might fearmonger you a little bit and kind of create some inner conflict. But yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to anchor in this idea that I'm hearing of just really tuning into your own experience. I'm hearing that from both of you, tuning into your experience and really listening to how your body's responding to what you're experimenting with. Because from my experience, that's been just a pivotal component of my healing journey is regularly attending to my body as I'm experimenting with different protocols, different lifestyle pieces, different dietary pieces. And so how important that is that you held on to that and didn't deny that, even though this doctor is telling you, fasting is not a good idea at the time. And I'm curious, you're saying that you got down to maybe 50, 30 grams of carbs, and your ketones were kind of where you wanted them to be. I'm curious how you were checking your ketones and how you're monitoring that, and then kind of the shifts that you were seeing as you were staying in ketosis during that period.
yes. So I took on this journey very seriously. I saw it as my gateway to my dream to
Mm-hmm.
become true, right? Like my dream of being free of medication and functioning well and just back to my old self, so to speak. That was so like mm, it felt unlimited in a positive, not that manic way, but really like in a very, I don't know, like with hard work you can achieve so much. That was,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a very good place to be at. Like I really wanted to gain that sense of I'm capable, so to speak, and like whatever I want, if I want to put in the work, I can have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took on this very seriously, and I got luck with finding someone who can support me with that. And it was unexpected because all the doctors did not want to support, but I did find a therapist back home. So it's someone that I still see till today, uh, just a lot less frequently now, but he was a therapist, and he agreed to do online sessions. And I explained to him what my situation is and what I want to do. And I told him I just need someone outside of me to objectively monitor my symptoms. So, yes, I do want to double click on the fact that I did listen to my body, but I also made sure that I'm not going against the grain, so to speak, and potentially being, not objective with the signals I may be picking up. So I wanted
Yeah.
a reassurance by a trusted person that what I'm hearing from my body is also legitimate, and it's safe to keep going that path. But
Yes.
just because it was so against the grain,
Absolutely.
I
That's
was
good.
scared. So finally I found him, he agreed, and I said I did my own research in terms of tapering, which is probably again the only thing I really had. I did not want to do that. I did not consider myself as the right person to do that. I didn't have the knowledge. I just didn't have any other choice. And so I did my
Mm-hmm.
own research, picked up whatever I could, and I decided to go that route of deep tapering off, like very little at little
Mm-hmm.
increments over time.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided that as I'm doing that, the ketogenic diet is going to be my version of medication.
Right.
So it was a treatment for me. It was not a diet. It was
Mm-hmm.
literally in place of that missing dose of medication that essentially completely went away at one point. And so, with that mindset of, I really want this, I want this more than anything. I want to be free, medication free, and thrive. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm going to do whatever it takes. So, I started measuring ketones, logging my food, just doing the best I knew how to get the most out of this experience from what I learned, what I read, places, right? Like reliable sources. The Charlie's Foundation, for example, was one of the first websites that I was trusting because, again, back then it was keto for epilepsy, not as much,
Mm-hmm.
not at all for mental health.
Mm.
And so I was using I bought some books on epilepsy and keto, and started tracking, making sure that I cook from scratch. I was so strict with it because I needed it to work, that the first 3 months I didn't allow myself to have any sweeteners because I'm like, this is my medication. I need it to work, and I don't want to fail this just because of some sweet tooth. And I was just so motivated that it didn't even feel, when you are on a mission to do something that you really want, giving up certain things is not as hard if
Yeah.
what you are getting potentially is bigger. It's so much bigger. And so I tracked, I measured, I was consistent, I didn't cheat. I did everything in my power. I was doing some breathing exercises to relieve the anxiety, meditation, yoga, running, anything I really could, also lowering stress during that transition as much as possible. But again, I was in a very stable place anyways, so it was I cannot say it was easy, but it was very doable. It was
Mhm.
doable. It came with challenges. It wasn't like super smooth, but it really was doable, and like it was nothing way too excessive, even though I did have periods where, so I kept my medication always there, the remaining prescription that I had, because I didn't, and that was my agreement with my therapist, that if I feel like I cannot handle it just with the diet, and this turns out not to be the treatment that I'm hoping it to be, I can keep back to my medication that I know it's working. So that was the good thing, that my medication was working with side effects, but it was working. It was keeping me together.
Mhm.
And so I kept that, and I had I think 2 times when I really was very close to going back to it, or maybe increasing the dose back to the previous increment.
Mm.
Or once I completely stopped it, at one point I felt like I
Mm.
need to get back to it. But then I end up not doing it. Like I somehow pushed through and handled the situation. And
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, so that always to say that I approached it with all the diligence, all the dedication, putting my best attempt in this, like
Mhm.
really doing the research as much as I possibly can and doing it as safely as I knew how to.
Mhm. That's amazing.
And when you shifted off the medication, how long were you doing the ketogenic diet after that? And what was your experience? Were your symptoms still in remission at that point?
So what I did was I implemented the diet consistently for 2 years. So I did have a tapering off period of about 6 months, and then another year and a half of being keto and completely medication free.
Wow.
So while on keto, I just felt like very differently, like never before. I felt more stable. There was anxiety, there was life and challenges and things
Yeah.
that will bring up a lot of doubt and uncertainty. But I was able to meet it and deal with it and handle it somehow, like without being too confident that I will. I was still scared and anxious, but I did end up over and over again dealing with it actually better than when I
Mm.
was on medications. And
Mm.
that really is that a sense of empowerment, really. And it's so big for
Yeah.
me. And that's why that's what I do professionally now. And I always center my work around us finding our own power,
Mhm.
to
Yes.
heal ourselves. What can we do
Yeah.
to help ourselves? And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I can do this. And it kept reinforcing itself. So to summarize, I did have the anxiety. That piece didn't, it reduced a lot, but it
Yeah.
was still there, obviously. It wasn't like everything completely resolved. That's totally not the case. But with a lot of structure and discipline, not just
Mhm.
with the diet, but the other pieces that I mentioned and sleep. And like I was so disciplined with everything.
Mhm.
I stayed on it for 2 years.
Mhm.
And then I was able to actually phase out of the diet little by little and transition
Mm.
into more low carb, still like less processed type of a diet, to
Yeah.
the point where I'm currently off the diet for a year and 3 months now, and off
Nice.
medications as well,
Wow.
and still
Wow.
being able to retain all the benefits of it.
Yes.
So the way I
Love that.
describe it is when I'm on keto, I'm my best version of myself in terms
Yeah.
of cognition and mood. That's it. But obviously keto it's just I felt I reached a point because I always in my life I was like low fat. And at one point my body was telling me that's a lot of fat
Mhm.
because I was also on that therapeutic ratio, which was very high fat.
Mm.
And again, I listened to my body, which was saying I cannot handle that much fat anymore. And I
Yeah.
felt like enough healing had happened
Mhm.
to the point where I was very scared, but I decided again to take the leap and experiment. And I was on and off and like being in ketosis a few days and then getting off and like just dipping my toe carefully up until I was like, okay, that's it. Like it's fine. I felt like my body really regained its power to like, I guess inflammation was low long
Mm.
enough and that healing on cellular level happened
Yes.
to the point where, as we know, with epilepsy, people can stay on the diet and then completely get off the diet without seizures ever coming back. And so I don't know
Mm.
if that would be the case for me, but so far, that's been my experience, and I love it.
It's
That's
so
so
hopeful.
great. Yeah.
It's
And I wanted to ask with that experience of empowerment, I'm hearing your emotions, your cognitions on the ketogenic diet at that period, you're feeling so good. What sort of impact did that have in your life as you're achieving that optimal health and feeling empowered?
It has had the most tremendous effects on my whole life. I literally redid my whole life. That project started last year, beginning of last year. Again, that sense of empowerment. When I saw what was possible, when I put my best effort, my honest effort and investment, not in terms of like effort as fixing myself, but like investing in my health and like really taking care of myself. Wow, it was very different than everything I knew. I was always like that damage, defectiveness, and like trying to fix and just not happy with myself and just like, oh, another thing to fix and just uh, you're getting
the
the
point.
sense of
Yeah.
yeah, where would it come from, right? Like it was
Yeah.
always like I'm so tired of myself. Like I just don't want to be myself.
Mm,
From a place of actually I do have potential, and if I provide myself with the right environment, like if I give invest in myself and I give myself
mm.
what I truly need, I don't have to go through those symptoms that are so
Yes.
annoying and unwanted and obviously, it's very stressful to experience. And
Yeah.
so I keep telling that even now when I work with clients or anyone that is just picking up my brain, I feel like when you get that sense of regaining your power over your health, you can then apply it in any aspect of your life. And
Yes.
so for me, it literally became that door opening to what is possible if I do that, career wise. What if
Mm.
I don't have to stick to the same job that is not quite, like eating
Yes.
the carbs version of like it feels like that was my safe thing that paid the bills and like it's all I knew, but it was not, in terms of purpose and heartfelt, I don't know, mission in life. It was not in as much alignment. It wasn't terrible, but it was just not it. And I knew it. And
Mhm.
so it enabled me to tap into and apply that same approach into other aspects to the point where I started my project, Life by Design, for myself last year. And I completely switched fields. I rearranged my priorities. I assessed my values,
Mhm.
really came to terms of approaching myself with love and compassion rather than constant judgment and demanding more and never be happy with where I am or like how much I do and like
Mm.
completely switching. And it wasn't like a one-time thing, and it's still
Yeah.
ongoing process, but it's just that the intention was different. And I
Mhm.
never looked back. And now that it's been, over a year moving in that direction, I cannot be more happy and feel in like peace with myself and just
Mhm.
um it really had given me the opportunity to change my life so much more and so much more dramatically into other aspects as well, rather than just the health realm, which obviously is the biggest one for me. And that's, always already good enough, but I was able to
Yeah.
even expand that.
Yeah, it's so so hopeful and empowering. I want to kind of mirror back that I see a lot of this like 2 years on a ketogenic diet and the body starts to tell us, okay, wait, we need to prioritize, detoxing or something like that. And I just think that's really interesting that you had that experience. And I see this a lot in my, clients. And also I've experienced that too. And there's this amazing 2 year mark too for the gut microbiome that I think that it has it's not always a rigid 2 years. I mean, there's always, a lot of variability with each and every person's story, and it can be drawn out or there can always be a little missing link there. So I wanted to talk about how did you transition? How did you support your body in that transition from from high fat, and like when you started to feel like the fat metabolism was not as good anymore, and your body was telling you, like, what did you do during that period in that transition?
Well, as I mentioned, I was conflicted again because I was like, oh no, I really need to stick to this because I know it's working. Why now?
Mhm.
Why now that I found something that works and now my body is almost like rejecting it?
Yeah.
So in a way, I was like, again, back to that, not knowing like this is, like what should I do? And I didn't trust it. Like for me, keto was my medication. I
Yeah.
treated it as in place of my medication. I trusted I'm going to be on it for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very happy to be on it. If that was what is the price to stay medication free, I enjoyed it. It wasn't that hard. I found my ways to make it, um, relatively easy and definitely enjoyable, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not happy about it, but I had to work with it. And so I started working with someone who helped me to first do the mindset shift
Yeah.
and really question the beliefs that maybe I have to stay on it for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I already had read Brain Energy by Chris Palmer, and he was talking about that potential of people staying on it for 2 to 5 years, and depending on always case by case, right? But just
Yes.
like as an average estimate, and potentially not needing to be on it while staying well.
Mm-hmm.
So why I didn't want to risk it, but I was at a point where my body didn't leave me much choice. I just like the thought of so high fat food was not like it was invoking almost like I don't want to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
So I, as much as I didn't want it, I had to. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started slowly again, going into more carbs, feeling sluggishness. Like at first, it was not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Everything got worse. Like I was slower, cognitively more impaired, felt like more foggy, just less energy. Yeah, mood was not as stable.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everything just comes together, not to a point where I was completely, it
Falling
was
apart.
very, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
I could sense a huge difference. There was a huge difference. And yet the idea again of maybe I can feel okay. And maybe, that's just a transition. And
Yeah.
what if I step up my game with other tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that I can allow myself the flexibility of being keto on and off. At first, that's what I thought. I'm not gonna like
Yeah.
completely stay like be off keto and just, I thought I'm gonna give it maybe like 50-50, maybe 6 weeks or 4 weeks on and 4 weeks off, or something like that was my
Mm-hmm.
initial plan. But then I did it. I kind of did it, just not as consistently because I feel like my being is tired of, I have done so much dieting and just that structure around eating. What my soul was craving was just freedom. I didn't want to have
Mm-hmm.
to think about what I'm allowed to eat, how to eat it, when to eat it. And again, that vision of maybe it's possible that I can have full freedom around food, and feel cognitively well. Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
a 10 out of 10, maybe 7 or 8. But with a lot more intensity, maybe with workout and other things, fulfillment, like being more in alignment with my
Yeah.
life's purpose, right? Those kind of other bigger projects that I did that are nothing related to food, right? That's
Right.
completely different, but it brings a level of peace of mind and
And health.
fulfillment and health. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it all beautifully works together. But yeah, I tried on and off, less structured, and just with time, I got to see that I was just also working not as highly demanding jobs anymore, not as many hours as part of
Mm.
that project. And I was able to be okay eating kind of lower carb, but not keto, and
Mm-hmm.
also focus more on whole foods, but also a lot of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that the more freedom I give to myself, less binges. And
Yeah.
binging really stopped for me a while ago. What I'm experiencing now is more of that emotional eating, where I
I
consciously
see.
choose to use food for, distraction, comfort, but it's very much aware and it's not out of control. It's almost like me
Ah,
deliberately
yeah.
choosing to fall into an old pattern.
Right.
So yeah,
Right. That's wonderful. That's such a beautiful way that you described that process because yeah, I see a lot of fatiguing, like diet fatiguing and just protocol fatigue. And there's never there's always flexibility and we get to be in control over what we want to do in
I
our
love
life.
that.
So if you want to take a break, you can take a break and you'll always have that tool to use ketogenic again, or it's not like forever decision. And there's a lot of flexibility that you showed in that experience. It's a, I love that you're coaching people and helping people do that because it's a hard thing, I think, for a lot of people in our society where it's just all or nothing. We have to do it perfect or it's not going to do what we want it to do. And, but there's just so much more truth to little by little trying to do make decisions towards the direction we're trying to go and have our hands open with the results and just see where that takes us. So,
Exactly. And all that,
oh, go
I'm
on.
sorry, I just wanted to say that
Yeah.
in that line of thoughts is I also don't know where my journey is going to go.
Yeah.
And
So
right, so it
exciting.
doesn't mean that where I am is where I'm going to stay. So I'm very open to potentially going back to keto at one point or
Mm,
implementing more fasting. But what I really learned is that we need to be flexible and attuned with the whole of our life, not
mm,
our bodies, our everything that's happening, and be able to navigate that in the best possible way right now, right? And that may
mhm.
look different at different times. So, and I
Yeah.
love that because it gives us that constant intuition and check-in and maintaining that connection and also freedom
Hmm.
and really good attunement with our needs at all time and honoring them.
Yeah. And I get so excited because you're also saying there are these other levers that you are
Yeah.
pulling now to help your metabolic health and just the kind of wheel of the wellness wheel, which is like I think a health coaching way to uh, kind of assess where all the different parts of your life are in balance, like you're saying, like living in authenticity to how you want to live your life. Can you touch on all of the other kind of levers that you're using now in your day to day? Diet is just such a foundational one, but now there's others too that I think don't get enough spotlight here.
Yes, absolutely. And that's my favorite thing to talk about because it's such a newfound land for me that I didn't know it existed. And so like obviously when I was doing keto, I fasting and exercise were my fasting, exercise, keto and sleep were my absolute go-to.
Hmm.
Everything else was I could play with it. Like I could be not as consistent if needed. It wouldn't impact, but those four would really, I had to be extremely disciplined. What I do now is more focus on the mindset and the peace of mind. I feel like this is such a big part of, we even know for keto, right? Like when we are stressed, cortisol gets activated in the body and that triggers insulin and that can, impair the depth of ketosis we're in. And
Hmm.
so where I am right now is more of a mindset work and living in gratitude and really using that attunement that started with the ketogenic diet and listening to my body to now apply it in every little aspect in my life and really following my heart and staying true to my values. I think just that, strangely enough, brings such a depth of peace of mind and
Mhm.
an inner alignment that everything else relaxes. So I
Yeah.
don't have to be so rigid anymore
Mhm.
with the other tools or things that I do. That being said, now I went through a period where I didn't do anything just because I wanted again to check, can I be okay without doing anything? And I was okay. Obviously, I was
Awesome.
not again 10 out of 10. I wasn't there, but I was functioning. Everything was fine.
Mhm.
And I came to a point where I now want to do things just to support myself. Again, that like investing back into me because it feels good. And
Mhm.
so what I do is meditation is an absolute must for me. Every morning I do the transcendental meditation. I used to do it twice a day. Right now, I do it only once in the mornings. I do have a lot of spiritual practices as well in terms of just not being so identified with, the egoic thoughts and desires. And like, because such a big part of my suffering is that not feeling enough and like
Mhm.
self-hatred and all of that. And with the eating disorder, also a big part of diving deeper and figuring it out was what are the thoughts that I'm thinking before I get to the binge, right? And like
Right.
adding
Mhm.
that pause between the trigger and the behavior. And so I had a coach who really helped me frame it in a very powerful way. The way he described it is, so think about having a pot on a stove top and the water is boiling and you have the steam. And the eating behavior is the steam. And by targeting resolving the eating behavior, you're like trying to get rid of the steam. So
Mm.
you're like wishing it
Mm.
away and like, and yes, it may exactly. But then and you are not targeting the root underneath. Instead of dealing with the steam here, why don't you turn the heat off so that it's no longer producing the steam? It's such a simple yet adequate example of what we're doing. And my therapist never wanted to work with me on the eating disorder. And I'm like, I don't need to work on anything else. I just need to get this in place. And he was like, that's not something I can help with. You can tune to yourself and like, but we can work on other things, right? Like the mindset shifts and all that. And so, where I am today, the biggest focus and how I support myself best is through working with my thoughts and challenging those negative ones that are just such a strong part of my old identity. I hope they
Yeah.
still linger and still show up a lot less frequently and less severely, and they're more gentle. And I have the tools to be with myself in those past versions or those parts of me, but I feel like that really has made a change because I feel like that addresses the turning the heat off. Because
Yeah.
if I don't have the thoughts, the self-deprecative thoughts that I'm not good enough or that I'm blaming myself, I'm ashamed of myself, I'm
Mhm.
not, I'm just not deserving anything good, right?
Mhm.
Now it's like the opposite, the really like nourishing thoughts and like fostering that self-compassion attitude. It has
Mhm.
done so much that I feel like as a byproduct of that, the eating disorder, I really don't relate to it the same way. I don't see it as such a big part of my life at all. It's
Yeah.
still part of it. It's not completely gone, but I'm very much aware of it. And it's to an extent where it doesn't really bother me, so to speak. And I can
Mhm.
honor it and see it for what it is and continue walking the path towards my healthiest and most vibrant self without worrying too much about it because it doesn't
Yeah.
help either. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you just said there, that you can honor that part of you that acts in that binge eating behavior with, but you have this like love, in a like this honoring of it had its purpose, and it wasn't, it was just trying to help you probably in a lot of ways. And I don't know if you want to share more about that, but I just love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just struck by that tool of pausing, noticing what's going on, because I think with my experience, so often I'm just go, 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 go. And when I can pause, I'm able to tune in to whatever story is going on internally for me.
Mm.
And it's really powerful to do that. So I'm hearing that's been a powerful tool. And then I'm also hearing there's this other tool for you of practicing showing yourself love, loving all of the parts of you. And so it's not just noticing and telling those critical voices go away. It's also bolstering this voice of I'm living into my mission, my passion. I really like who I am. Taking time to do that as well with tracking with those pieces.
Absolutely, yes. And it yes, so I guess those two, and they beautifully kind of align with each other because it's just allowing the pause without doing the other piece cannot be as profound and vice versa. So I feel like you really have to have both, and that allowing the pause really for me started with just taking two breaths bit before, because the thing with binging, right, is when you get the urge, it's all about doing it now. It doesn't want to wait. And it's the waiting is the hardest part. And so you don't want to allow the space. At least that was my experience. And so I started with two breaths. And sometimes I didn't want to even do that. It was so urgent and instinctive that I couldn't even hold it for two breaths. I couldn't. But then the rule was to take the breaths, even if I take the first bite, at least take the breath somewhere in the process and little
Mm.
by little, expand that gap. And
Awesome.
um, I loved Eckhart Tolle's work, the book like Power of Now, and I've taken
Yeah.
some of his courses. He speaks a lot about that being in the present moment, here and now.
Hmm.
And the more we are able to honor that, it's a whole different world that opens up, really. Like instead of being
Yes.
in the mind that it can take us horrible places if it's
Hmm.
not trained. But and then doing the other work, like working with the thoughts and that, almost like shifting the identity, really, like
Hmm.
appreciating what it was, and it's understanding it was a survival mechanism, and it really served us. Like it had the best intention, but almost like growing out of it and assessing it properly, honoring it, being appreciative and grateful for what it did, but also acknowledging it was not the most intelligent way to do it,
Right.
and that now there are better options, and kind of like embracing that part, letting it be with me almost like in the car, in the back
Yeah.
seat, but not driving the car.
I love that. I
And
know.
those, yeah, I feel like those two are just so connected and so powerfully working together that they can bring anyone to quite of a different place in life.
Yes. Well, and can you tell us a little bit more about in your work? I wonder if you have a particular case that you could share of someone else that you've helped with the ketogenic diet, or how do you work with people in a case study to share with people?
Yes, I do love this work because it can be so transformative, and that has been my experience, obviously personal, but also what I see with others do.
Mm.
And the funny thing is that I feel like life is navigating me into a direction where I really help people implement the diet first, and kind of like my story, right? Where you first experience that you're reclaiming your control over your health with this diet. You feel much better. You're starting to think what's possible now that I am so much more cognitively capable, just like better mood. I can think, I can show up for life and responsibilities much more uh, just consistent way, really. And so once they're done with that, it's like
Mhm.
they're ready to do this other work, which is
Mhm.
more of the life coaching that I also absolutely love doing. And I practice on myself and walk the walk every single day. And that's where I help them to really question those thoughts and be with those parts, and like really
Mm.
also um dream big in terms of what they really want. And it's not so much about the big, right? It's more about the alignment. Like, what is it really that they want? And when I say dream big, it's just challenging all those beliefs that say that's not possible. But like, if it's really your heart's calling and your mission, and like it's your purpose, right? And we all know there is that there is that thing, but it's just not always as expressed due to those limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging behaviors and just that identity we build. And so inviting them forward to step into a whole new identity based on their experience with the diet, right? Like
Mm.
they already won this huge battle. And so why not replicating? It takes the exact same ingredients. It's just in a different field. And it may not be with diet and ingredients is a little bit, you know, less um anyways, it's just I can see how people are reclaiming their lives, how
Yeah.
they're stepping into a whole different version of themselves, powerfully, confidently owning it because it's them who do it. And I make sure they understand that no one else
Yeah.
can do it for them. And yes, there are people that are supportive on the way and maybe provide the information and guidance, but it's us ultimately. I'm so big in that like personal responsibility piece. And when I see people taking responsibility and like doing it, and what becomes available and them stepping into it is just mind blowing. And so
Mm.
I do have clients who have said that, it has been the best decision of their life and it has helped them completely reconsider the direction of what becomes available. So
Mm.
I absolutely love seeing not even just someone who felt like life was so miserable, even to get a little bit better, it's such a huge win. And I feel like they never stop there though, because
Mm-hmm.
if they feel better sooner or later, they keep coming back and maybe want to build more on it and get stricter or, look for just other ways to deepen that positive impact.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very involved in the community with this movement,
Yes.
metabolic psychiatry, just seeing private clients, but also leading a group where people share their experiences.
Awesome.
I'm a published co-author of actual clinical studies, and
Mm-hmm.
everything that I see is nothing short of transformative. It's just so
Yeah.
powerful. It is so inspiring to witness and brings so much hope to me. It fills my heart, obviously, as
Yeah.
someone with a lived experience, but
Mm.
just seeing what it does for people and their loved ones and how many people need it and how much once they experience it, they want to help
Yeah.
others that are in similar position. Seeing that ripple effect is just the most fulfilling type of work I could ever. I call it work, but it doesn't feel like it really because it's so inspiring and nourishing and amazing. But to be honest with you, I haven't seen anyone that didn't benefit. And I do screen, people that I work with. I always ask them their level of commitment. So I only work
Right.
with those who are ready.
Mm-hmm.
And those who are ready, they do it. They show up, they do
Mm-hmm.
things right. They want to feel better. They're serious about it. They're not embracing that victim mentality. They're looking for the positive and
Mm-hmm.
they get to the other side of it. And some of
Mm-hmm.
them consider going to school, which was never an option. Some of them completely transform their whole lives. Some are on a path to that. But overall, the
Mm-hmm.
impact is quite phenomenal and very positive in that positive direction. And I cannot get enough of it. I'm always up for
Wow.
doing more of that
Yeah.
kind of work.
Yes.
Absolutely. That ripple effect is so hopeful, isn't it? There's a lot in
Yes,
our society that part of me feels pessimistic about, but when you see grassroots healing, it's a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
thanks for
absolutely.
so much for taking the time to
Thank
be
you.
present with us today and share from your heart. I know it's really going to resonate with all those who are able to listen to this interview. And I think we'll have to have you back if you're open to it because I really want to talk about the clinical trials that you've participated in and the research that you've done and you clearly have a wide breadth of knowledge on this topic, and so I'd love to have you back and talk more. But as we're wrapping up here, before we ask you maybe one last question, where's a good place for people to learn more about your work? Do you offer virtual sessions for, people? Could you share a bit about that?
Yes, yes. So the best place to find me is my website. It is transformationevoked.com, very much in alignment with my story. And I do have a meetup group that's always free for people. So in addition to the private one coaching and group coaching that's coming soon, I do have an absolutely free platform where I love attending events at. We have some guest speakers, but most of all, it's a community of like-minded people who are on the similar journey, and we just get together and we share openly and give and get support. And it's an amazing experience. Everyone is leaving with something. Like it's always, even if it's not as clinically oriented, it's more of a peer to peer, but it can be so inspiring and so powerful that I just love seeing the connections that are made and the impact that one person's share can have on so many others that relate to the same experience. And so anyone who would like to join certain types of communities, it's always free and it's on Meetup. But there is a link on my website. So through my website, you can find all of the work that I do, the private coaching, all the research that is published, that I'm part of, and hopefully more to come, because I'm very excited about this. I am committed to continue contributing as much as I possibly can. And I'm hopeful that we'll see more projects coming alive, making impact, supporting each other, and just hopefully coming to a place where ketogenic diet as a metabolic therapy becomes a first line of treatment, so people are aware that this is an option and a quite powerful one.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Thank
And
you.
the last question I'll pose for you is for someone who's facing that really critical voice of there's something wrong with me, I'm not enough. What's a message you'd want them to hold on to?
That's a very good question, and one that I um, still deal with from time to time, just a lot better now. In my personal experience, one of the tools that really has helped make a difference is Byron Katie work called The Work, and it helps
Mm-hmm.
question all of our thoughts, especially the negative ones. So
Mm-hmm.
for someone with depression, low self-worth, it's less self-oriented. It's usually we get to the truth through thinking, like judging others and what we think they think of us. So for example, if someone thinks I'm not good enough, maybe they can phrase it as other people think I'm not good enough, and start just working with that thought and transforming it at the root. It's a very powerful process, and I recommend it to anyone who is really struggling. It has been the most helpful tool I have found so far.
That's
That's
wonderful.
great.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks again, Donika. It's been a really engaging conversation.
Thank you so much.